ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CaUltra, the CAU podcast. This is where we do our normal recaps, but instead of the Toronto Defiant, we do it for the Toronto Ultra, aka the Call of Duty League team for Toronto. I am your host, Spencer Chason, and with me as always is...
Hey, I'm Chris, co-host. Today we have a very, very quick recap. We're just going to recap this past tournament, the Paris Homestands. And we'll be looking to release a different video for previewing the next tournament when that comes up.
Yeah, I was going to say, because right now there's a 3-week break, so instead of doing our normally what we would do is preview the recent tournament and then give our predictions for the next one. But there's, I think it's in 3 weeks. We have a couple weeks to work with. So for this one, it's just going to be quick. It's going to be a recap. As always, if you enjoy, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, leave a comment, tell us what you agree, tell us what you don't agree. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Okay, so as Chris previously stated, the most recent game was the Paris Homestand, in which the Toronto Ultra ended up coming top 8, I believe. We ended up losing to Atlanta FaZe in the very first match, 3-2. We were then able to, in an extremely close match, by the way, beat the Optic Gaming 3-0 in a one-sided affair, to say the least. And then finally, we were able to go into the top 8 position, where we unfortunately lost a really close 3-1 match to the New York Subliners. So, Chris, let's just start off where the Toronto Ultra started off, and that's versus the Atlanta FaZe. So how did that game sort of pan out to you?
Man, to be honest, I really, really liked it. There were some shortcomings for the Toronto Ultra, but when you're the bottom team, literally the bottom team for Ultra, facing up against the top of the ladder team, and you take them to the 6th or the 5th match with a 11 to... I believe it was 11-10 victory, like 11th map. It's absolutely amazing. Like, I could not have really asked for more from the Ultra, and I wasn't really expecting as much as they gave us. We had some interesting plays. I think that the players that are typically lower on my radar for performance, people like Bance, Cammy, they did pretty well. I think that during that actual tournament. And I think we get to this a little bit later, but I also think that CleanX performed pretty well indeed in that tournament, or in that, match as well.
Well, we can talk about it now, because that was one of the points I was going to bring up. He received a lot of praise almost immediately. Everybody was like, oh my God, look at CleanX, he's so good. And I don't want to be the one to knock on people's parades, but I was kind of like, okay, can we chill for a second, right? Like he started out really well, right? The first hard point, which we lost to Atlanta FaZe, he had a really good performance. He was our best player. And then the Search and Destroy, which we won, and then the next Domination, I think, which we won, he actually didn't perform that well. It was people really hyped him up over the game, but if you looked at I think we the 2 maps we won, he actually didn't perform very well, and it was the 3 maps he performed well, we actually ended up losing. So I don't want to say he just blew me away, where I was like, wow, every map this guy was top fragging, every map he was in the kill feed. There's definitely a couple maps there, especially his S&D. I know at the end, the final one, he popped off for us, the Heartbreak map 11, but the previous one, he wasn't nearly as impressive. So not to rain on his parade, I think it was a really good debut. And at the end of the day, when we tweeted this out, I love the way he plays. He's very much a gun. You could just tell the raw talent, the raw mechanical skill that he brought to the table when he was hitting, when he went on that 12 spree. I don't think that was against Atlanta FaZe, but still, you could just see the raw skill that he has. And I think it's a good player to add to a roster like this, because it was something they severely lacked. But once again, it brings us to the main criticism of this team all year, and that's the inconsistency. I wanted to see him do that across multiple different maps and really carry a series, and we just didn't see that, which is kind of unfair because it was his first game. So I'm looking forward to see where he can improve upon. But yeah, I think people instantly crown him as the second coming, the savior of this team. And I was like, well, I mean, let's chill for a second. He had a couple pretty poor performances where he bottom fragged on the team. So I don't know. I don't know if I was watching the same game everybody else was.
Yeah, one thing about crowds is they're quick to praise and they're quick to turn into a mob. I think CleanX, and I don't know if you agree with me, I feel like CleanX may have been brought on because we've been traditionally struggling with hardpoint, and
exactly,
he's a little bit more of a hardpoint specialist.
Yeah, he is.
I know that, especially in the game against Optic Gaming and the match against the New York Subliners, I think he we were doing a lot better on hard points. We were being able to break those
Completely
hard
agree.
points and get them back.
And I'm hoping that like his S&D and domination and stuff like that will improve as he just becomes more coordinated with the team and the strategy and stuff like that. I think he did struggle a little bit in S&D, but you're right. Our hard point was extremely improved, and CleanX was a big reason for that because especially I think it was against New York where we were like down on the hard point and everyone was like, hard point Ramaza, like it's going to be tough for the I did it again. I'm sorry. The Toronto Ultra to win. And that was sort of New York's best map, and then CleanX just put the team on his back and went 12 in a row and carried us back to winning. Like that was insane what he was able to do. And unfortunately, that match didn't go the way that I think a lot of people wanted it to go. But for the one map that I think a lot of people said we were going to lose, he was like the main reason why we ended up taking the win. Him and Cammy. Cammy also popped off. Cammy had a good weekend. Cammy impressed me a lot this weekend.
Yeah, Cammy did well too. I think he did well on he did pretty well in Search and Destroy when it came to holding sight lines as a sniper.
He's a really good sniper.
I think he shined in that sort of era. And did you want to comment at all anything on the Opti Gaming? I know we slapped them, but was there anything else you stood out to you?
I did because we talked about this a little bit on Twitter, and we talked about this sort of in previous episodes. This was like losing to Atlanta FaZe. People kept being like, "Wow, what a good performance!" Like Toronto Ultra, the bottom team took the top team to 11 rounds in the map 5, and I was like, "Man, I've heard this storyline before, right?" This was the same Toronto Ultra team that took the Chicago Huntsmen to map 5 round 11, and everybody was like, "Oh, they're gonna ride this wave. They're coming into their own," and then they lose to the London Royal Ravens, and then this is the same team that took the Dallas Empire to map 5, the same team that went to the semifinals versus Optic Gaming just a couple tournaments ago, map 5, round 11, lost. People were like, wow, they're going to ride this wave and they're going to come in there and have a really good showing. And then we lose to OGLA, and then we lose to, I forget the second team we lost to last weekend. But you know what I mean? It was like, once again, like every time this team seems to like have a close performance against a really good team, they're not able to capitalize in the next match. So when people were praising them versus Atlanta FaZe, it's like, yeah, it's great that we took it to map 5, round 11, but like we've seen this before. At some point, I got to stop praising a team for almost winning, like they have to win. But the thing that impressed me the most was where in previous iterations, they would follow up their good performances by a poor performance. We finally saw them like bring FaZe to map 11 really close. And then the next game, they played Optic, which was a winnable game, and they showed it. They crushed them. And I love to see that. Like, to me, the biggest thing was we're finally seeing some level of like fight and consistency in this team where they follow up good performances with even better performances. So that's what impressed me the most, is I was expecting them to win, and they won handily.
That is a good point, is that it seems like, well, clearly right now the worst thing about Ultra is, or the thing that they need to improve the most is consistency.
Yeah.
And they've started to build that consistency. I don't think you can go from being a very, very inconsistent team to a very consistent team in one tournament. It takes some time, and it shows that they built some consistency by slapping Optic Gaming.
Yeah.
But they still did quite poorly against New York. And
that's the issue. So we can get to the New York game. I don't know. I actually think they did like quite poorly. Like, it's easy to look at the 3-1 scoreline and think that was the case, but this was a New York team that was really good on hardpoint Ramaza. They're like 6-1, and Toronto was like 0-1, like not our strongest map. And we came in there, and people were saying if we can win map 1, we're in a really good position to win the series. And we won map 1. And I know a lot of it was off of CleanX absolutely popping off. But when you take into consideration that, like, at one point Metals was like quadruple negative, like it was insane. He had a terrible map. He had a terrible map 1, and we were still able to win essentially 4v5. Like, that was a really good match. And then it goes into Search and Destroy, which was, again, I think they won like 6-4, and it was a 6-4 where like we had 2 maps in a row that were incredibly winnable for the Toronto Ultra, and we just like kind of threw it away. And it was another map where I would have gave us the advantage because New York wasn't a good Search and Destroy team. And then you go into domination, and it was like we were crushing them, right? The first half we were up like 50 points. Like, it was a New York team that was a really poor gunrunner team, and we're up 50 points, and then it just seemed like we just threw that away too. And then the final map we were getting crushed, but then all of a sudden we're able to bring it back to a 15-point deficit. Like, it was such a weird game because. Sorry, continue.
No, that is why it was disappointing. Is because it was that level of inconsistency. Metals being a classically good player going like down 4 negative, like just absolutely blowing a gasket.
I know he didn't
That
finish
is
4 negative, but there was moments where he was that poor.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's why it was such a bad game, is because they just were the definition of what their past problems have been in that game. Now, when I think about like how do you solve a consistency problem, because it's they clearly have the ability to play at high peak potential, but what's caused them to not play at that potential all the time? I think it is routine. I think it's not possibly not having a built routine around pregame warm up, playing in the game, post game cool down. I think it is, because whenever I think about the best that I've been in sports, anything, it is the routine that has caused me to be consistent in one level. And I think this is classic COD League, but it's the one thing I can think of is when playing beer pong in university. The best I ever did at beer pong, most consistent I ever was.
What are you doing? What are you doing here? Because we're like 3 episodes into Call of Duty League, and you're making beer pong comparisons, really?
The most consistent I ever was when I formed a routine around a pre-shot. You have your stance, do a couple of...
You could have used free throws in basketball. There's a way better example for this. The whole thing is free throws in basketball is that they have the same routine every time they take a free throw, and you're taught that from early on when you play basketball that you need to mimic that every time you go to the free throw line, because it keeps the muscle memory. But you chose beer pong was your choice. So
because there's
a legit traditional sports comparison here, and you botched it. Okay, so I do agree that that's in specific cases important. I don't know about the comparison between beer pong and Call of Duty League. This one's on you. In the comment section below, let me know if you believe in Chris and his beer pong and Call of Duty League comparison. For me, it was like obviously it's inconsistency. I think it's more like roster issues potentially. Like it's hard to build consistency when you have a different roster every single weekend. I also think that. I also think I was wrong. I said 6-4 in Stitch and Story. It was 6-2, I believe, because I know Metal started 0-6. Which again was it was essentially 4v5 for the first 2 matches, and they were still pretty close. This was a team that this was such a winnable game, and I think that I agree that routine, consistency in roster, and finding that right starting 5 are going to be so important for this team, because you saw it again that this is such a winnable game for them, and they were so close once again to getting top 4, and they just couldn't close it out. But at least there was some positive signs. Over the 3 games on the weekend, it was a really close game against a good team in Atlanta. It was a domination against a lower tier team in Optic, which you want to see, and then another really close game versus an upper tier team in New York. I know they're not top 4, but they're in that 8-6 range. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to what they do next. Overall, I think how much this team has changed their roster and how much people want Classics back in the lineup. I don't know if it's a good week to be Metals. You got to feel pretty rough, even though I don't necessarily agree with just benching someone based on 2 maps of poor performances. But we'll see what the roster changes look like moving forward. I do kind of expect some, because I did miss Classics, even though CleanX was cracked out, and I want to see him stay. I think there's still a better starting 5. And maybe we'll get into that next week. Maybe next week's episode will be who is your starting 5 for the Toronto Ultra. They got a couple weeks to scrim to build this team chemistry before the next tournament, which is July 10th, I believe. So they have time. And overall, I think it was a good weekend. Not a great weekend, but a good one. Unfortunately, we're in a pretty rough spot for champs.
Yes.
We need to get out of the bottom 2 especially. I think it's bottom 4. I think bottom 4 is starting the losers bracket, which sucks.
Ooh,
that makes it go from a double elimination tournament to a single elimination tournament. So we really need to try to get in that top 8. And I think our coach tweeted out that in order to get in the top 8, we probably need top 4 in the next 2 tournaments, which is a big task.
That's a big ask.
It's a very big ask. But if you think we can do it, stay tuned to our preview, because we will preview whether or not the Toronto Defiant can get to that top 4 in the next upcoming tournament in a couple of weeks. I don't know about you, Chris, but any final closing thoughts you want about this tournament?
No, I don't think I have any final closing thoughts. I think you ended it on a great note. And if you guys like this video, please feel free to comment, subscribe, dislike it. And we'll be looking forward to another episode next week.
Yeah. So overall, good weekend as a whole. Stay tuned for more previews and recaps coming soon. And as always, guys, enjoy.